how did you scale up, essentially being obsessed with it enough to become a Kaggle Grandmaster?
I like to do the analogy with chess. Like one day you can try the game of chess and you just get hooked and you will spend 10 hours a day improving your gameplay. And that's pretty much what I did with Kaggle. When I'm on the last week of a competition, maybe I spent easily 12 hours a day on Kaggle. And it does not stop on the weekend. When I got started, I didn't even know PyTorch. So I think I got my first gold medal maybe 5 months afterwards.
Today, I had the pleasure of interviewing Theo Viel. Theo is a French 3-time Kaggle Grandmaster in competitions, notebooks, and discussions. He's also part of the Kaggle Grandmaster of NVIDIA team, also known as KGMoN. He's mostly interested in deep learning, but is keen to tackle any problem as long as it's challenging and he's learning new things. In this episode, we learn about Theo's origins in Kaggle, how he keeps a regular competition schedule, and what it's like to be on the Kaggle Grandmaster team, and much, much more. Theo and the rest of the KGMoN team will be speaking at GTC, which is happening from March 20th to 23rd. So be sure to check that out as well. I'll be doing a little giveaway of a RTX 4080 GPU, as well as 5 Deep Learning Institute credits. More details on how to win all of those at the end of this episode. So Theo, thank you so much for coming on the Ken's Nearest Neighbors podcast. Obviously, we met at the Kaggle Days World Championship. I guess it was maybe 3 or 4 months ago. And I'm fortunate enough to have you come in and tell your story here as well. So thank you again.
Thanks a lot for having me, Ken. It was great meeting you. So very happy to be on the podcast.
Amazing. Well, I'm really grateful to have you here. I mean, you have a very, I think, unique and interesting background as it comes to your experience with Kaggle, as well as your day-to-day work at NVIDIA. If I recall correctly, you're on the Kaggle Grandmaster team there. So in the episode, I'm excited to sort of dive into what that means, as well as learn a lot more about you and your journey through the machine learning path.
Yep, let's get started.
Amazing. So something I like to do to get all the listeners familiar with you is I'd love to hear where you first got interested in the domain related to data. Was there a pivotal moment where you're like, wow, this thing happened, maybe you took a course and you fell in love with it, or was it more of a slow progression over time?
I think it was kind of by default that I got into data. Like I did a French engineering school, which is one of the things you can do when you are good in math, basically. And then we pass exams, basically, and we are ranked among all the country. And depending on your ranking, you get to a specific school. So I did not really choose my school. I got accepted at this very one. And they had a mathematics and computer science option and great courses, which I took. And this led me into data science, basically, because nowadays, when you do applied mathematics in France, you will end up most likely doing machine learning.
Very cool. So how did you go from essentially graduating your coursework to working now at NVIDIA? What was that process like for
you? Well, there was one point in the middle where I found Kaggle, so that's the shortcut I took to join NVIDIA. But at first, one of the things that is great about French studies is that you have the opportunity to do a lot of internships. So I did 3 of them, and so this gave me a lot of experience. And also, that's when I got started in Kaggle. Because during the first one, I was a bit bored, and I was like, oh, there's this competition. It's like the same as my internship topic. I should have a look at it. So I did, and it went all right. And so I kept checking the website now and then, and did not really stop. And yes, I got hired in NVIDIA because of Kaggle. So.
Amazing. Well, so I'm interested a little bit in the like French education system. So are those internships, they're part of your coursework? They're like built into the curriculum, or you still have to go out and find those? So I know, for example, in Canada, there's a school called, I think it's University of Waterloo, where they have like a co-op approach, where essentially instead of some of your classes, you're required to do an internship. which I actually think is a very good approach. Is that something similar that you see in France, or is it just, internships are more heavily focused on than traditional studies?
Well, it really depends. I think in my courses, I had one mandatory internship at its end, but it was very like we were pushed forward to do a gap year. And during this gap year, the school will help us like with the paperwork to do internships. And I think in my school, like 95% of people would do a gap year. It was not a break. We were doing studies and working for companies, but that's the key thing they did to push us to do more internships.
I really like that. I think it's, a lot of people in the US, or a lot of people in other countries globally, they're not familiar with how education systems work outside of their country. And I think it's really important to look around and view what you like in what other countries do. I think that that's a really neat thing. I also think taking a gap year to work would probably be something that'd be really valuable for students to do in the United States. There's nothing that actually prevents you from taking a gap year and working and then going back to school or something along those lines. So that's pretty fascinating to me. I quite enjoy that aspect of it. Now, I'd love to hear a little bit more about your Kaggle story. So, you worked on one of these competitions when you were at your internship, and then did you immediately just fall in love with it and want to keep doing it, or how did you scale up to essentially being obsessed with it enough to become a Kaggle Grandmaster?
Mm, yeah, I don't really remember, but or I have that type of personality of people that like tryharding. It's like I like to do the analogy with chess. Like one day you can try the game of chess and you just get hooked and you will spend 10 hours a day improving your gameplay basically. And that's pretty much what I did with Kaggle. I found that there is this really cool website where I can compete with people, but also learn a lot. And at the first time, my idea was to get proficient with machine learning and pretty much any topic because I knew that it would help me with my career. But then as I got better and better at it, it was more about like getting the rankings, gold medals, top 5, top 10, etc. But you get the idea.
Yeah, I get it. So, we talked a little bit about how maybe the Kaggle competitor community is a little bit different than the overall Kaggle community. Like, can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, if you look at Kaggle overall, that's several millions of users. I think that's the number. But if you look closely at competitions, you're gonna find mostly the same faces. Like the top 200, top 100, you're gonna be like, okay, I know this person is been on this competition as well, and they are basically people a bit like I am, or it's like professional, I'd say, Kaggle enthusiasts, people that have pushed it to another level and that are really invested on Kaggle, that like to see the platform do well and enjoy competing.
Amazing. What's your favorite part about competing, do you think?
Mm, yeah, there's several things to it. I like learning new stuff, but as you compete more and more, you learn a bit less. But I really enjoy like building the complicated pipelines and when everything works really well and you're happy with what you've done, you've beaten a bunch of folks, you've performed really well. Yeah, I like
So
being proud of my code.
you, you you talked about beating a couple of folks. Do you have any like rivalries, or do you have anyone that you like to beat? I know in at the Kaggle Days World Championship, you partnered with Sebastian. Are there other people that you like to partner with, but you also like, if you don't partner with them and you beat them in the competition, you're like, oh, I got them this time.
Yeah, people I know, like it's funny to beat them. You know, it's friendly competition. Like people in my team, we share stuff afterwards. Like, oh, you beat us by half a point. Oh, you are deciding. For instance, in auto, we got third, and Kazuki got second, he's also at NVIDIA. So
Awesome. Well, congratulations in third place in that competition. That's pretty awesome.
nice.
So was there a time, or like, what do you think was your biggest breakthrough in competitions? Was there a single moment where something just clicked, or was it just that each competition you try to get better? Or was there, some methodology, some like standard pipeline you developed over the course of your career to use in competitions? I'm just really interested in the idea that, you're improving over time. What led to the greatest improvement for you over time in Kaggle competitions?
Mm. Well, when I got started, I did not even know PyTorch, so that already learning PyTorch was a huge improvement. That was, yeah, I don't know, 4 years ago, maybe 5, I don't remember. And I think I got my first gold medal maybe 5 months afterwards, maybe 6. I don't even know. And there was nothing much really different from what I started. Just I was more consistent. I did not waste time trying stuff that was useless. And yeah, I spent a lot of time experimenting. And the thing is, the more you experiment on competitions, the more you'll get a feeling about what works and what does not work. And you can reuse this knowledge to perform better in other competitions. Like, for instance, I did one audio competition. We got like top 10. This was my first gold medal. And 1 year after, I did another one. And I already knew that to tackle audio competitions, you need to use spectrograms most of the time. So I started with that. And I built on top of that. I used common IDs, which I already knew. Like, for instance, mix-up works really well. So I use that, and trick sizes. It's like adding knowledge on top of your previous knowledge.
I like that. I think that's a good metaphor for a lot of things, even outside of machine learning, is that you can build on what scaffolding you have. Also, it probably helps to write good code because you can go back and reference and just pull things. I know I learned that lesson the hard way, is when I go back and I look at my code and I'm like, oh no, I'm gonna have to do a lot of work to make this usable again for a different use case. Then I mess something up.
Yeah, that's one of the advice I give. Like, you need to optimize your code, put it on GitHub, document it, make sure you understand it when you come back to it later.
Yeah, I
It's not
have.
easy. Yeah, go
Go
ahead.
ahead.
Sorry. It's not easy. I think I oftentimes don't understand what I do after a few months, but it's getting better.
Well, there's this concept of, like copying code, which I think is really important. The best person that you can copy from or plagiarize from is from yourself, right? If you write really good code that's useful, you can go back and reuse it. And it's really not plagiarism if you're doing it that way. I don't think anyone should plagiarize or copy without giving accreditation, but you should be building the infrastructure that you want to go back and reference. Like, that's, in my mind, one thing that makes me successful in my work is I've already built a lot of the tools that I would use recurringly. Why wouldn't I continue to build out that? And over the course of my career, I have all of the stuff that I've ever built as a reference to build new things. And I think that's hopefully a powerful thing that many Kaggle Grandmasters leverage as well.
Yeah, as the thing is, you cannot like reduce the quality of your code when you iterate over it. It's always gonna get better. And at one point, it's gonna plateau, but as you improve, your code will improve, and you won't basically lose stuff when you improve your code.
Yeah, that's really true. I never thought of it like that. I recently released the course that I wish I had had when I was starting out in the data science domain. It's called The Machine Learning Process from A to Z, and I partnered with 365 Data Science to build this. I also worked with my good friend Jeff Lee, who's one of the most impressive data scientists I know, to get all of the implementation correct. This course is special for a couple reasons. So first, it focuses on the machine learning process. So you go from ideation to data collection, to exploratory data analysis, all of the steps to building and implementing a data science project. It's all taken care of for you. We don't focus as much on the algorithms. This is all about getting a project out the door. Next, we've also open sourced all of our code and all of our examples on GitHub and Kaggle. Those are very easily accessible to everyone, including those people who just maybe want to see those and don't want to pay for the full course. In addition to that, we've included all of the resources that we use to build the course, so you're getting multiple different perspectives on every single concept rather than just our singular voice. I view this course as one of the most valuable things that I've put into the world, and I'm excited to hear what you think of it. I've included a discount link in the description for the YouTube video, as well as in the descriptions on all the other podcast platforms. Well, switching gears, I'm interested in sort of your schedule. So how many Kaggle competitions do you do a year? Or do you try to do a year? And how do you balance that with your work?
Well, there's two sides to this answer. There's now that I am at NVIDIA, but Kaggle is my job, so I can Kaggle full time. And there was before, because I started Kaggling when I was a student. Then I worked for 2 years and kept Kaggling. So before NVIDIA, I think I did about maybe 5 competitions a year, really seriously. What I mean by that is I will invest maybe 30 hours a week on the competition and will go for the gold medal. What I mean by seriously. So I will do probably 5 a year. And now that I am at NVIDIA, so it's been 5 months, I guess, maybe a bit less, a bit more. It's going to be higher than that because it's basically my job, so I can dedicate more on doing that. And I think so far I've done 4 competitions already in 5 months. So should be maybe 10 a year. And
wow, that's pretty good.
Even that is a bit too much for me because to really I like to spend about 2 months on the competition. So you're not really rushed by the deadline in the end. And in some competition here, I was a bit rushed.
So in those 2 months, how do you break down the work that you do usually? Is the first week about ideating or getting just a simple working model and then iterating on it? Or, do you have phases that you go through in that process? Because you described to me recently that you were in the last week of competition and you had to do a lot of work and it was pretty stressful. So how do you break down that 2 months into what you're working on?
Yeah, if I join, let's say 2 months before the deadline, first week is gonna be catching up with the discussions, on the forum. I start following the competition even before I start coding because there's a lot of idea. You can build your intuition, understand the problem, and also it helps me choosing which competition I want to take part in. And then I dedicate, let's say, a week to build a good baseline. Ideally, I try to build the best public notebook, but it's not always easy, so it can take maybe 2 or 3 weeks to build the baseline. And then as I start to iterate. And the thing is, as soon as I start coding, I write ideas. I have a memo sticky note somewhere on my desktop, and I write idea. I throw random stuff on it, and as soon as I progress, I cross down things. Okay, this worked, this does not work. So I'm making progress as I cross ideas on this list, and ultimately I should end up maybe around the top 50 of the leaderboard. And then if I'm stuck, I will consider teaming up.
Okay, so the team up process comes later in the event. You don't start with a team, or do you sometimes start with the team?
Sometimes I start with the team, but I think it's slightly better if you work alone. Because if you start with someone, you're already restraining your possibilities of experimentation because you're not fully like independent on your ideas. So you can probably lose a bit here.
So it seems like what you're saying is if you've already gone down the path with your, your own ideas, when you team up with
Yeah.
someone, the ideas are like completely, essentially like exclusive from each other, so you get more benefit. And can it be as
Yeah.
simple as just like averaging the two models, or like how does that usually work? How do you integrate with another competitor?
Sometimes averaging two models is really good already. Like, and then you share tricks. For instance, when we merged in Auto, we had three pipelines in the end. So we worked separately on our pipelines while sharing ideas and features, but in the end, we averaged predictions. Even though we merged, like we still have three different models.
I think that's a really cool aspect of joining of teaming up in this like world, is that you just like at the end you can just take the outputs and combine them. Like you don't have to merge the infrastructure or do any of those. I mean, sometimes you might have to, but to me
Yeah,
that's kind of cool, is that you like there's very little extra work to combine forces in some circumstances, and you can get significantly better results. That's like it continually keeps me in awe about the profession.
yeah, you're always gonna gain if you merge. You're gonna gain knowledge. You're gonna learn from the other person, and your leaderboard score is gonna improve as well. So
Let's talk a little bit more about acquiring knowledge and learning. So you've been part of the Kaggle Grandmaster team for, I think it was 5 months, you said. And I'm wondering what that experience has been like. Okay, well, first, could you explain a little bit about what that is at NVIDIA? And then I'd love to hear about what you've learned from working around or working with some other incredible grandmasters.
yeah, so NVIDIA has this team of grandmasters, which is called Kaggle Grandmasters of NVIDIA, and I would say KGMoN. That's the short for the team name. And some of the members are well-known people from the Kaggle community. Well, most of us are actually. There's Jiba, who was rank one, Dieter, who was rank one as well, Chris Diot, who is rank one in kernels and discussions, and yeah, a lot of famous people, CPMP, GY. Anyway, so those are thrilling people to work with because yeah, they are really talented and people you can learn a lot from. And yeah, what we do in NVIDIA is competing on Kaggle, but not only. Like Kaggle is the face that most people see because we are visible, and our job is to do well in competitions and to show that using NVIDIA products you can do well in competitions. But we also do data science for NVIDIA, since we have a lot of expertise thanks to competitions. We share knowledge and we help teams with complicated problems. Like NVIDIA is a huge company; they have a lot of interesting and challenging topics, and we provide expertise on them.
Amazing. Does that go into like the machine learning, like the research side as well, or is it more like, hey, we have, we built this new infrastructure, can you test it out and see how well it works? um yeah.
Those are two examples that we do. We help the research team provide feedback to developers. We also do like applied machine learning, pretty much anything you can think of. Like, as long as there's a need for modeling, we can help.
Amazing. Well, so I'm really interested in what your biggest learning has been working with so many interesting people so far. Is it just being able to have more access to their code? Is it, well, their code's usually somewhat publicized on Kaggle, but is it being able to ask for feedback? Like, where do you get the most benefit in your growth there?
I think yeah, feedback is really important. I don't really look at their code, well, not more than when I was on Kaggle. but you get a lot of feedback. You get to discuss with them. When I team up with them, I learn a lot. And when we discuss solutions when the competition is over, there's also a lot of stuff to learn. So yeah, the learning slope is very steep. So that's really nice. And also you're at NVIDIA, so you have like the best company to do Kaggle, basically.
Yeah, I mean, it must nice also to have like so many resources at your disposal. You know, this seems like a dream job to you. I would imagine, just because you are so excited about it, and you do have, as you self-proclaim, the try hard personality. Um, yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
and the
also,
good thing, yeah, go ahead, sorry.
go ahead.
Yeah, in the team, everyone is a tryhard, so we get along well.
Oh, amazing! That is too funny. Um, I am a little bit interested in, you know, you're obviously working quite hard, right? You're spending a lot of time on these competitions. How do you avoid burning out with, uh, you know, with a lot of pressure that you have on yourself? Or I mean, you described there isn't that much pressure because you want to perform well, but the outcomes aren't necessarily measured by NVIDIA. But you know,
Yeah,
how do you stay essentially sane when you're working so hard in like a very uh, intensive domain?
I think the thing that is saving me is taking breaks. Like when I do, when I'm on the last week of a competition, maybe I spend easily 12 hours a day on Kaggle. So that's a lot, and it does not stop on the weekend. But that only lasts 2 weeks. So as long as afterwards you take time for yourself, it's fine. After auto, for instance, I went skiing with friends, so it was a good way to get the pressure out and everything. But yeah, mostly it's you need to have something else in your life that helps you like forget about Kaggle. For instance, I spend time with friends, I do sport, I do exercise, I go out, and such ideas.
Amazing. Well, so I I'm interested in how that time is broken down. You said you spend 12 hours a day. Like, is that 12 hours a day hands on keyboard, or like maybe over the course of a project? How much time do you spend on some of like the different elements of the competition? You know, like whether it's creating your pipelines, like feature engineering, actually building stuff. It probably varies by competition, but like, what do you spend your most amount of time on in a competition?
Mm, for instance, let's say a deep learning competition, because that's what I do most. There's no feature engineering. The the bottleneck is going to be model training time, basically. So what I usually do is I wake up quite late in the morning because I'm not a morning person. So I wake up at 10. And first thing I do is like I check the experiments I did overnight to see like to get basically conclusion from the work I've done before. Then I will also check the forums and on Kaggle, check the Slack if I have a team, and this already takes a lot of time. Like if I did to rerun an inference, it can take up to 2 hours, and it's already midday. So and afterwards, yeah, oftentimes in the early hours of the afternoon, I will try to implement a new feature. Like, oh, I have this thing I want to try. Let's code a bit, and I would code, let's say, like 2 or 3 hours. And in the meantime, maybe also we try an experiment regarding like this experiment went well. I want to retry this stuff or such ideas. And I will take a break or so, time to eat, and yeah, basically continue coding up until it's dinner time. And then I probably take a break as well, like go out if I have plans, go climbing or stuff like that. And yeah, I try to also launch an experiment before I go to bed. So it's kind of syncing my schedule with my models. For instance, if I have a model that takes 10 hours to run, I need to make sure I launch an experiment in the morning and on the evening. Therefore, I do not lose time.
Amazing. And I imagine you also are launching multiple experiments at the same time, and whether
Yeah.
it, that seems like quite a nice advantage that you get from having almost unlimited compute power at your disposal. I feel like that's like a super helpful thing, is that, like, we can try these three things at the same time rather than just working locally and you're like, I have this one machine and I just have to let it go.
Yeah, I usually have 4 machines running like constantly. But before NVIDIA, I had 1 machine and I could still like uh, do well on Kaggle with 1 machine.
And
I mean,
it's a
I got, yeah, so go on, sorry.
is that when, before you were working for NVIDIA, was that also like you were doing a virtual machine paying for that, or was that like a hardware workstation you had?
At first, I had my own workstation with 2080 Ti, which used to be a good card. Now it's a bit outdated. And then I used the computer I had for work, basically, which had A6000. And it's a great card. A bit expensive, but definitely worth the cost because that's 48 gigas of RAM. And that's useful for big models.
Amazing. And so, what's the benefit of having a local workstation versus using cloud for some of these competitions?
It's cheaper. So it's no secret. If you rent an instance, it's gonna become super expensive really fast. And also, yeah, it's your computer, so you're at ease on it. You can install your packages, have whichever IDE you want.
Yeah.
It's
Well, yeah, I think that's an interesting observation, because everyone's like, that A6000 is what, like $3,000-$4,000, but over time you get cost savings after you're using it a certain amount, which is pretty interesting. I think that a lot of people are sort of balk at the price tag, but then they're like, oh, if I'm using it this intensively for these types of things, whether at work or on Kaggle, like, there's a tipping point where the cost is actually worth it.
Yeah, I think I paid like 2,000 for my first rig for Kaggle. It was maybe reimbursed in 2 weeks. So, because of the thing I saved on cloud compute. And then I won some prizes, so it paid for the machine.
Paid for even
That's
more. I
annoying.
love that. Well, we're talking about, for example, compute. We're talking about improving your skill set. Something you'd mentioned is you love how you learn from these competitions. How do you continue to upskill? I think that there are so many new techniques out there. There's so many opportunities to get better. How do you choose what to focus on? Or, do you try and learn it all, or do you just try to learn one thing at a time?
I think my secret is I don't try to learn anything. Like for instance, I don't really read papers anymore. I used to when I was a student, but now I feel like it's not even worth my time. So what I do is jump on a competition. I try to improve my score and read forums, read IDs, and when I'm stuck, there I can try to look for some papers. But the thing is, there's so much knowledge with machine learning, AI, stuff like that. You can't keep up with everything. So you have to focus on the thing that's going to interest you. And on a Kaggle competition can be, for instance, yeah, a command system. I can read a blog post on Rexist or stuff like that. I can study solution from previous competitions. It's usually going to be much worth your time than reading like the top 10 new papers on archive or stuff like that. But that's my view. It's a bit controversial, I think.
Yeah, well, I think it's very, very interesting, because I don't think there's other fields that have anything like Kaggle, right? So Kaggle allows the cutting edge of machine learning to be experimented with, to be tried in real competition, and you see if it works. So you're actually getting innovation sometimes on Kaggle rather than on a research paper. You get to see it real time. So in some sense, you might be closer to what's purely cutting edge by working in the competitions than actually waiting for the research to come out, which I find crazy. You see someone do something, it works, it doesn't work, it gets tested in real time. I don't think that there's any domain in the world, I'm probably wrong about that, but off the top of my head, I don't think there's any other domain where you get to see these things happen or innovation happen in real time. You look at medicine, things have to get approved, things have to be researched, you have to do all these different studies. In some sense, Kaggle is the proving ground, or the place where you do go to validate a lot of the things that people are working on at the cutting edge of research. So you're just taking a shortcut, maybe.
Yeah, absolutely. I like to use the expression applied state of the art. It's state of the art thing that works in practice. Like, for instance, ImageNet, state of the art is going to be huge model transformers. Applied state of the art is going to be efficient net. It's simple, it works, it's great. Don't bother with billions of parameters.
Yeah, that's amazing. I think that's a really nice concept for people to start to think about and evaluate, is rather than, how do you make these things useful right away? What applications are they useful for right away? And Kaggle is really a great place for that. In terms of your goals, I'm interested what you're hoping. Do you have any goals you've set for yourself related to Kaggle? Like, what would you like to achieve maybe in the next year or the next couple of years?
Well, I have this goal, which is climbing the rankings of competitions. I think I'm 18th right now. I want to get to the top 10. It should be doable. It's hard because there's a lot of super talented people in the top 10, but it should be doable. And yeah, probably also achieve dataset grandmaster. That's the only tier I'm missing, but it's not really hard. It's just time consuming.
Yeah. So what does it take to become a dataset grandmaster? I think something that I'm always interested in is, where people generate a lot of this data, or where they collect it from. What are the legal constraints of that? Because I know data generation or data collection is very different in the United States versus Europe versus somewhere like China. Um, and, how do you go about creating a new data set to upload to Kaggle?
I, I have no idea. That's probably why I'm not a dataset
That's why.
grandmaster. I don't want to do that. I saw people doing it. I'm like, okay, I'm not going to bother with that. It's too complicated. Yeah, maybe share models, share preprocessed stuff. Is probably the way I will go. Like, if you start a competition, you see the dataset is complicated, you can simplify it a bit and share it. Should be good enough.
Amazing. I like it.
No
I like it.
GDPR with that.
Yeah. So uh, obviously, NVIDIA has this Kaggle Grandmaster program. There's some other companies that also have teams of people working on Kaggle. Do you think that that's going to be a common phenomenon in the future, where companies will showcase their products, or showcase their um, what they're working on through Kaggle? I think it would be like a really cool thing if all these companies just had these teams, and we got to see them compete, and you could choose your favorite company. But does it seem like it's trending that way, or is this Kaggle Grandmaster program, KGMoN at NVIDIA, seem like sort of one of a kind?
Mm, it's not really one of a kind because several companies are doing it. But I think there's not a lot of companies who will gain a lot from the exposure on Kaggle. But what I want to see is, and it's already happening sort of, people using Kaggle to hire grandmasters. And if companies get a lot of strong competitors, it's a big plus for them because they will get great data scientists. And initially, that's the idea of Kaggle, is to upskill people for companies to hire them. So we'll probably see a bit of that, like companies are hiring strong Kagglers as lead data scientists or stuff like that. But full teams of people promoting their products, a bit complicated.
I know there was a reasonable amount of criticism early on that Kaggle competitions weren't like real world machine learning problems. Like they were too almost like too clean. I personally don't think that that's the case at all, but I'm interested if you've seen maybe a progression or a change in the Kaggle competitions over time, so that are they relatable to what a data scientist would do in a normal job versus working in a competition, or what are maybe some of the differences?
Thing is, yes, there's a lot of things you can do as a data scientist, and there's also a lot of things you can do on Kaggle, but a bit less. And what Kaggle trains you for is modeling, and that's only part of the job of a data scientist. Like data scientist has to do data cleaning, setting up the metric, discussing with clients, other teams, software engineers, and stuff like that. On Kaggle, you don't bother with that. You do the models and the inference pipeline. And on these two things, if you're great on Kaggle, you're going to be really great at this part of your job. But on the others, I can't really tell.
Well, so I think that's a super fascinating point, because the greater data science or larger data domain, I believe, is becoming more specialized, right? So we have data engineers becoming increasingly popular, machine learning engineering becoming increasingly popular, and actual data science roles, from the last research I saw, are decreasing because there are more specializations. Data science used to be a catch-all term. And so when I look at that, it sort of makes sense. It's actually boosting the skill set of a Kaggle competitor, because I think if you have really good data engineers, you're going to be doing a little bit less data cleaning. If you're focusing more on a machine learning engineering role, you might not really be doing any data cleaning, but you'll be doing some MLOps stuff and putting models into production, which isn't necessarily like the end part of production, where you're creating the APIs and stuff, isn't necessarily something that you're doing on Kaggle. But there is a part of that skill set where you are just doing modeling now, whereas there used to be more breadth in what that domain meant. So I would argue that, for example, for machine learning engineers, there's a massive like overlap between Kaggle and that type of work, compared to just Kaggle and a normal data scientist job. So it seems like the overall domain is becoming more friendly, or more practical even, for people coming from Kaggle into the workforce, which I think is a really good thing.
Yeah, and recruiters and companies overall are starting to understand better data science overall. They understand who they need to hire for a specific problem. If they want to put model in production, they will go for a machine learning engineer. They won't go for a data scientist anymore. And this used to be the case a few years back, but right now it's a bit like it's better divided. So that's a good thing.
Amazing. Theo, those are all the questions I had. Do you have any words of wisdom, any recommendation for people interested in breaking into Kaggle, starting with competitions? Is there anything that you have going on? I know you're speaking at GTC coming up, that you'd like to share about as well.
Yeah, the GTC would be a thing. Like we have this panel with with the other grandmasters, in which we discuss like pretty much the sort of thing we've been discussing together, like why Kaggle is great, how it can help you get a job, what are the best practices, and stuff like that. So we'll be discussing that, and feel free to join. And yeah,
Amazing.
otherwise, don't really know.
Theo, this was amazing. Thank you so much for your time, and I'm excited to see your talk at GTC.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks for watching this episode of Ken's Nearest Neighbors. Again, I'm doing this giveaway of an RTX 4080 and 5 Deep Learning Institute credits from NVIDIA. You'll only need to do 3 things to be eligible. So first, watch the whole episode and comment your favorite part of this interview. Second, sign up and attend a GTC session in the link that's pinned in the comments or in the show notes. It is completely free and it's a great resource for learning about the cutting edge of artificial intelligence and machine learning. And third, fill out the Google form with a screenshot from any of the sessions that you attended.